Hey, you ever feel tired?
Nope, never.
Never. Ever feel like I just don't want to be a leader today? I want to coast.
Yep.
I want to sit back and relax.
Yep.
I'm done. Not today. Yeah, kind of lacking some pep in your leadership step.
Oh, I like that. Lacking. Say that again.
Lacking pep in your leadership step.
Yep, I like that. Who knew Bill was a poet?
Yeah, who knew? Jared and I were getting ready for this episode, and I mentioned that I was in Chicago at the time. Cal Ripken was there, and he was awarded for having the most consecutive games played in baseball. It's 2,632, by the way, a record that still hasn't been broken.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking, this guy just got an award for showing up to work consistently. What company or business does that anymore?
I don't know.
Right? And what kind of motivation did it take for him just to be so consecutive, so consistent in showing up and playing the game every time? Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty amazing. And it's hard to stay motivated today at times.
So it is. It really is.
So as a leader, how do you do it? How do you stay motivated? We kind of want to talk about that a little bit today. And maybe trying to give you some tips, and there's going to be a bonus tip at the end we'll mention.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is kind of the safety net, a catch-all. But hang out. I think you're going to really appreciate this. So,
yeah, and just by way of disclosure too, if we were with you physically, like, sitting down in a coffee shop across the table, lattes in hand, we may ask you some of these following questions here just to help you understand why. Right. So, for instance, like what life circumstances are you facing right now? Sometimes you're going through something and it just zaps your motivation. You lost a loved one, or
storm of life. Family has cancer, or in the hospital, or
right.
Yeah.
So that what we mean and what we want to do with that question is just a kind of a little bit of investigation.
Yeah.
Right? Just say, hey, what's your life like right now? What are you facing? What are you going through? Are there hardships? Are there challenges? The next one will be a little bit deeper, I think, in retrospect. But why are you a leader? That's a big arcing overall question, but it cuts, I think, right to the heart of the issue as well.
Yeah, motivation. Why you're in it, why you're in the game, the leadership game.
Yeah, and perhaps what value do you see in being a leader? This is the Value Added Podcast, after all.
And we want to add value to you.
So what value do you see in being a leader?
Yeah.
And then, do you see the potential of your leadership influence on others? Like, do you see the potential you could have? So again, what life circumstances are you facing? Why are you a leader? What value do you see in being a leader? And do you see the potential of your influence on other people? Those would be some of the questions I would ask.
Busy world, it's hard to slow down and just stare out the window for a moment and think about these questions. So we really encourage you to maybe even pause the episode, take 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and think about those questions.
Yeah. I think, too, it almost harkens, it's kind of a throwback to when you and I think one of our first episodes, maybe even, we gave kind of our leadership growth plans.
Yeah.
And sometimes dropping some of these questions kind of peppered throughout, asking yourself kind of periodically, kind of doing like a little rain check on your own motivation isn't a bad idea,
For a number of years, my birthday's in the summer, and of course there's Christmas in the winter, and I use those two events to just trigger, okay, did I grow in the last 6 months? How am I doing? Am I heading in the right direction?
Right.
So maybe finding something like that to trigger yourself, to just sit back and ask.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into kind of how do you stay motivated as a leader? That's a big question.
Yeah, so I think we're going to cover three, and then again a bonus. And the first one we have for you is inspiration. It's staying connected with other leaders. And this is not something new. People of like-mindedness hang around each other, and they rub off on each other. When I was a young man, I loved snowmobiling, and I would hang around all the snowmobilers I could because it was a shared interest.
Yeah.
But now it's leadership is my focus, and I've been hanging around leadership and okay, what do you do and how do you do it and why do you do it that way? Okay, let me write that down and I'm going to remember that one. And
Yeah.
no, I don't like that one, but I'm going to do that one. And here's what I do. You do that? Oh, I like that idea. Let me write. So it's this back and forth of being inspired and sharing the leadership journey. Jared and I have mentioned before, leadership it's a team sport. You're a leader, but you just don't do it alone.
Yeah.
You need to put gas in your tank to keep going. And one of the ways to do that is staying connected with other leaders, sharing stories and best practices and mistakes and lessons learned. But leaders inspire each other. We keep each other accountable. Are you doing what you said you were going to do in your leadership? Right?
Right.
So, and we just need each other. We really do to keep motivated.
Yeah, one of the thoughts that crossed my mind in prepping for this episode is you have this whole sports analogy going on that we often give.
Yep.
We go either sports or parenting or both. And for me, the sporting one is I learned at a pretty early age, although it's not quite as fun sometimes, you want to play and practice with people who are much better than you are.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you have leaders that you know personally that are doing, their journeys are a little more advanced than even yours are, not to say that they don't have their struggles, but you're going to learn a lot, I think, just from being in that space. And I think it's, we tend to look at that as like, oh, look at their journey, then look at mine, because we play the comparison game.
We do.
But if we flip our perspective and say, you know what, I'm lacking motivation, let me go ask so-and-so today, how did they get through this part of their leadership journey?
You almost want to look for a mentor, right? And
Right.
we've talked about this. Look for someone who's 10 years ahead of you, and then look for someone you can pour into. It's maybe
Right.
it's 10 years behind you. Maybe not it's 10, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 7. Maybe they just have a whole wealth of different experience they've learned from that you haven't yet. You just go sit under them and listen and absorb what they have to say, and then turn around and take the tools you've put in your toolbox and seek to put it in someone else's. That's very inspiring.
Yeah, and I think when you're looking at this through the lens of motivation, it is a little bit for me a perspective change. Like I know sometimes I don't feel like coming over, doing the podcast, sessions, or I don't feel like going into work and getting a certain amount of things done. And a lot of times I think through, our conversations or conversations I've had with my dad, who's one of my, inspirations. And I just have to say, you know what? I have to change my perspective a little bit. Like I get to do this. I get to influence people. And I need to help to motivate myself by changing my perspective and being inspired by other leaders instead of discouraged by their success, learning to keep myself accountable, asking for help to stay accountable, right? Hey, I said I was going to accomplish these 3 things this year. Did I do it?
Right.
And then just really understanding I need this space and time with other leaders for me. That's not a selfish thing, but you just need that space and that time. I think that lens of motivation is a perspective change.
This is not in our script, but another thing that being connected and being inspired with other leaders and that really helps with is the imposter syndrome. I'm not worthy. I can't do it. I'm a failure. No, I'm not. I wouldn't be good at that. That self-talk we all at one point or another struggle with. When you're inspired and hanging around someone else, they can actually speak the truth from a different perspective, kind of take your emotions out of the equation and they can speak into your life. It's like, no, you can do this. Or no, that's not a good fit, but over here would be a good fit because you excel with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So there's a difference, I think, between confidence, which is what the imposter syndrome attacks, and then there's identity, which also dribbles into the imposter syndrome is, who am I? Am I of value? Do I have value to share? That's one of the things I struggled with starting this podcast.
Sure.
And we talked about this. We sat back and we was like, oh, I've been kind of had a leader position over so many years. I might have 1 or 2 things to say about it after 35 years of experience.
Yeah, no, exactly. And again, we're going to do, I think, a whole episode on imposter syndrome. I think if I'm correct,
it's coming.
We were thinking through that the other day. But yeah, so there's just great thoughts. Going deep, with yourself is huge. But yeah, staying motivated, how to stay motivated as a leader for sure. You definitely want to think through, space with other leaders. We inspire each other. We keep each other accountable. We need each other. But I think too, when it comes to this question of, how do I stay motivated when I have those days where there's no pep in my leadership step, right?
Yeah, there you go.
One of the things we talk about, Bill and I talk about and think through and try to practice is being the audience. You look at successful people, have discovered what they're good at, right? And successful leaders discover what other people are good at. And that takes sometimes you got to force yourself, right? Create
Practice,
the habit, practice of sitting back and just observing. And I think John Maxwell has a quote, change is inevitable, growth is optional. And that kind of helps in this space where, if you want to learn to be a leader who is self-motivated or doesn't lack motivation, all the time, you have to understand things are going to change. One of the things that needs to change is our ability as leaders to be observers sometimes, because that's going to lead, I think, to growth.
And also point out, hey, I contributed to that. I put one of those tools in their toolbox and they grew, right?
For sure.
That's a reward, not prideful, not arrogant. I mean, I don't know if you've ever worked, remember when you're in school, you worked on a paper or project and you did really well and you were proud of the work you did. That's not that's a healthy kind of pride, not the arrogant, I'm better than everybody pride. That's I put the effort in. And I think that plays a role here in us as we're being the audience and watching the people we interact with and pour into actually grow and develop. Then that's a huge motivation. That puts a fire in my belly, to be honest. That's one of my favorite things about being a leader is developing others and watch them step up. And even beyond me, there's people I've spoken into are far higher in the food chain, in the leadership food chain than I am now. And I'm like, thank you, for the opportunity to have play a part in that role. Yeah. So,
I remember when I did building construction, one of the coolest things is when my wife would pull up to a job site and I got a little bit of that, like, oh, she gets to see, like, when we at one point we were doing in my career of building, we were doing massive buildings. I think I talked about this before, these big elderly housing complexes and things. And so they were impressive as they were going up. And so I'd see her down there and I'd wave. I'd be walking up in the trusses, flying trusses with the crane, and we'd be getting them and setting them. And, and she's down there kind of like, my husband's way up there all the time. Like, it's kind of crazy, But you did. Then when you drive by those, I would tell my kids, hey, Daddy was on the crew that, that built that, and see the trim up around those dormers? Like, Daddy did that, and so sometimes just sitting back and looking and observing can help motivate you. And it doesn't have to be big, grand buildings. It can just be, like I said, those little details on those big projects that you were a part of. Like you were saying, hey, I did that trim right there. I put those 5 pieces on right there. And then I did that one over there. And it has a way of, let's go do this again. That was kind of cool.
I love that analogy. You made me just remember when I was in college in summers, I worked for a landscaper tree surgeon. And there's a retaining wall not less than an hour from here that's still standing that I built when I was in college. So that's kind of a healthy pride moment to relish in. That puts gas in your tank to stay motivated.
It is. So be the audience.
Yeah. Be the audience is number 2. So the first one was staying connected with other leaders. Be the audience is number 2. Third one we have for you today as how to stay motivated is something from our favorite leader, John Maxwell. I watched him in an interview on a podcast, and he was asked this very question: how do you stay motivated? I absolutely loved his answer, and I started using it. I'm like, man, this is really working. And his answer was anticipation. And the way I look at that, and I'm going to phrase this in my words, is what's on the other side of yes. If I do this leadership, if I do this project, if I do this event, if I step up and invest in this person, and yes, it works out. It's hard. There'll be hurdles to get over, and maybe 3 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of thing. But if you keep asking, what's on the other side of yes, that's motivating. And to be honest, when Jared and I started this podcast, that's been my perception of this podcast.
Right.
We're early on. We're new to podcasting. We're not new to leadership.
Got a small handful of followers.
We're working out video issues, sound issues, where to record, when to record, and we're learning. We're learning, one thing new every week and trying to apply it.
Still don't like seeing ourselves on camera.
But there's that. Yeah. But just what when this goes, when we start developing more of a community that we can speak into and share our lessons with, and watch you and hear from you, right?
It's anticipation.
That's the other side of yes for me, is to hearing from you and what you're doing and learning and the value we've added and what's not working. We'd love to hear that so we can learn as well. We haven't arrived. We have experience, but we're still reading and growing, and
Right.
which we'll talk about in another episode. Leaders are readers. We're always learning about this. So
It's funny too, because again, back to sports, we do this in coaching with kids, and even with adults in some jobs that I've had, if they, my boss or superior will do this, they'll create anticipation. So like just the other day, Coach B and I were coaching, and he told the kid, it was batting practice and softball, middle school girls. And so he said, all right, if we can get 8 balls, there's like 14 girls, they're a lot of them, half the team is just learning, half the team has played before. And so he said, okay, we should be able to get 8 balls into the infield, into the outfield. He was doing some slow pitching. And so they had this anticipation of, if we can get 8 balls into the outfield, we're going for ice cream. So what's on the other side of accomplishing this said goal, right, is ice cream. We're down at the local ice cream spot. So that just rings true in my mind. We do this with kids all the time. You kind of create that anticipation, and it's that question of what's on the other side of yes. So what a great analogy.
He's always looking, going back to John's answer, he's always looking for what's next, how he can grow and change. And, what he did before to get him where he was is not good enough to continue to go forward to grow to the next step. So having that challenge in front of him of what's next and what's the other side of that yes is a high motivation for him.
Yeah.
At least he said. And I'll drop the link to that interview with John in the show notes.
Yeah, that would be great.
On YouTube. So
give credit where credit is due. Good old John Maxwell.
John.
Yeah. So I know for me too that staying motivated, it's a very personal issue. And sometimes we want to kind of recoil into ourselves and say, you know what, this is just something I'm struggling with. Why do I struggle with this? Nobody else does. And look at them accomplishing this and that. And you tend to have a pessimistic, because I don't know if you're a little bit like me in that respect, where you're bumping up against some hardship. If you tend to feel that emotion and then like pitch your tents there, like you're going to camp and hang out there for a while, put the kettle on, as they say, you'll never get out of that. So you want to be able to stay inspired. You want to be able to be an observer. You want to be able to lean into this anticipation, and hopefully this self-issue doesn't have to stay a self-issue. Because let's be honest, everybody struggles with motivation at some point.
Yeah, very much.
There's no superhuman out there that's like motivated. Even the people that are the the most positive, like outgoing, extroverted people, they always seem to have pep in their leadership step, right? Come on. When you get to know them, I know a few of those people, and actually they're unfortunately worse than I am, behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And that's sad, right? Because they don't ever really just let out the fact that, hey, I lack motivation. I don't want to be doing this right now. And so I think
I guarantee you the best leader that you've ever seen and watched, and the one you may look up to the most, has dealt with this.
Oh, for sure.
Every single one of us has had struggle and bumped up against the wall of motivation.
Yeah. So maybe step one would be admit that sometimes you might lack motivation.
Yeah.
Right. If that's you, but I'm assuming if you're clicking on this and you're watching it, it's because I do lack some motivation.
At times,
so
yeah,
which is us. So, and we do want to throw out a bonus point. So again, the 3 points we had were stay inspired, right? Be an observer, be the audience, right? And then lean into anticipation. Those were kind of our 3 core. Hey, if you want to stay motivated, practice staying inspired, practice being an observer, practice leaning into anticipation. What's on the other side of yes? And then a bonus point is just a thought. It's just an overall thought that discipline carries motivation. I think that motivation rides on the back of discipline. So if you can discipline yourself and create healthy habits, right, of depending on what it is you're lacking motivation with, just self-habits, right, to help you, to keep you moving and stepping forward, motivation will come.
And we hate that word, don't we? Discipline at times.
It's such a baggage word.
It is. And 2 thoughts, a few weeks, but over a month ago, I joined the gym and I started wanting to get fit. Going on a vacation with a lot of walking, I wanted to make sure I was able to enjoy it with huffing and puffing, or without huffing and
Without
puffing.
huffing and puffing, yeah.
Right. So
Oxygen.
that was my motivation. And now it's gotten to, first day and like, I don't want to go out the door. I don't want to do this. And, after the second week, third week, it just wake up and you go, this is the time I do this. I just do this. Right. It's become that natural habit, that discipline has developed that. It's the same with leadership as well. As we just do, I'm a leader. This is what I do as a leader. This is who I am as a leader. So having that discipline, it's that safety net that pushes us through when our emotions aren't necessarily lined up.
Right. Or our emotions can be lying to us at times.
Right, exactly. Just because we have a thought in our head doesn't mean we need to agree with that thought that comes into our head.
Exactly.
So, and just on a personal note, I'll share with you, as leaders, one of the things I think that trips us up, and I'll say it trips me up, is my ambition as a leader, my desire, not like ambition, but just desire to be better, is at a higher capacity than I am, right? I want to perform at this capacity as a leader, but in reality, I'm still down here and I'm still growing. And it goes back to the law of the lid from Maxwell.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
If you're a level 7 leader, you can only reproduce level 6 leaders. You have to grow to 8 and perform at 8 to get someone to a 7.
Right.
And so on, right? But my ambition, my desire, and maybe I'm lying to myself at times. Hey, I'm an 8, I'm a 9. I'm like, nah, you're a 5, Bill. You're still got a long way to go. So just to accurately think on what is my capacity at the moment, and what am I doing to challenge myself
To grow that.
Yeah. And that's where the safety net of self-discipline really comes into effect as our bonus point here, because this is the time I do this. This is the time I study leadership. This is the time I practice my growing as a leader. This is just the time I do it. And those other things that come along kind of satiate that emotional desire that puts the fire in us to continue on. So just food for thought. There's a capacity issue, and thinking clearly about it and being intentional about growth when it comes to allowing our own motivation to undercut us.
Yeah. And I'll throw one more thought in there for me too. I'll give the same kind of gym analogy for me. Sometimes it's the people. It's the connections that I have, the friends that I've made. So I'll wake up in the morning and I'll be like, oh, I don't want to go. And I'll even be pulling in, after the drive, 10 minutes or whatever, I'll be pulling in. I'll be like, oh, look at all these losers, looking at the cars, like trying to get in shape. Right. And I go in and all of a sudden there's my buddy Brian, right? And he's like, hey, good to see you. How's your morning going? And I'm like, Then I see, Heather and some other people. And it's like, yeah, this is kind of, it's good for the soul, right? To be here. And then being connected with other like-minded people lifts my spirits.
Yeah.
So the discipline to get myself there is on me. Ain't nobody showing up at my house, cold clocking me to knock me out, putting me in their trunk and driving me over there, right? I have to get myself there. But once the discipline is followed through, the motivation, I think, comes. And that's what I kind of mean by motivation rides on the back of discipline. If you can discipline yourself just enough, the motivation will come.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that's every single time.
Nope.
But I think as a general rule of thumb, it does. That will definitely help.
Yeah.
But
So, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate your time. Drop a comment below on how you're staying motivated as a leader, and if anything you heard today has added value to you, we'd love to hear from you.
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you next time.
Take care.